Welcome everyone, I'm Dario, your host of this very interesting next masterclass related to customer experience, AI, and other cutting-edge technologies which can improve the personalization level towards HCPs. Really looking forward to this extraordinary 2 days with great speakers, great partners, and I think it will be very insightful and meaningful. Mark, what do you think?
Thanks, Dario. I'm Mark Benthin, CEO and founder of VIIHEALTH. I'm excited that we can come together with Next Pharma and host these great speakers and look at how AI and personalization can be applied to benefit and drive the customer experience. But I want us to remember, before we begin, it's not only about data and algorithms and high science. This new era is also about personality and convergence, bringing more personal interactions back into various digital channels. It's also about content, finding the best ways to produce content that is at the same time insightful, bite-sized, and also modular to maximize reuse.
Thank you, Mark. Now my expectations are even higher. And looking forward to our first session of day one, coming from Tom Edwards, Omnicom. Tom, stage is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm incredibly excited to be here with you today. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to have pop culture references. We're really going to get to the root of why emerging technology impacts consumer behavior. I used to talk a lot about how disruption was the new normal and how each technology would transform experiences. But now it's less about disruption and it's more about convergence. It's about the coming together of multiple technologies to reframe how we think about the world. It's not just about artificial intelligence. It's not just about augmented reality or the metaverse. It's about how all these things are accelerating exponentially together to reframe our reality. All right, we're going to have some fun today. I mentioned pop culture references. We're going to talk about Star Wars. We're going to talk about Fortnite. We're going to talk about Pixar movies, and we're going to talk about The Matrix. That's kind of the roadmap for us today. Before I talk about the future, I like to talk about the past. Growing up in the late 70s, and yes, I'm dating myself here just a little bit, I loved Star Wars. It was the first movie that I ever saw. Most of my friends wanted to be Han Solo or Luke Skywalker, but for me, it was about the droids. It was about how they enabled the experience every step of the way. But growing up in the 80s, technology didn't quite meet my expectation. And yes, that is Robbie the Robot from the original Super Nintendo Entertainment System. So at that specific point in time, Star Wars was a little bit far from reality. But we had hope. Going into the 90s and then into the 2000s, we see the rise of connectivity. And have any of you ever had the original Motorola Razr phone? Yeah? Remember trying to text with that, the 3 numbers and the 3 letters? Anyway, but then we get to a key pivotal moment in time. Most people think that in 2007 is when the real transformational innovation came with the original iPhone. But for me, it was actually in 2008 with the launch of the App Store. This is when we begin to see personalized experiences. And this began to put us on the path towards the expectation of control. So now, as we're looking through kind of how we're going to go through the day today, we're going to talk about 3 specific filters that I like to use when I'm evaluating emerging technologies. Empower, that's all about control. So exponential is all about intelligent systems. Enhanced is about basically the blending of physical and digital reality. So we're going to start with empower. All right, empower is all about control. There are 4 facets to what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Gen Z. We're going to talk about the lens's life. We're going to talk about how the future is private. And we're ultimately going to talk about how the camera is a bridge to intelligence. Let's talk a little Gen Z, shall we? I have 3 Gen Zs in my house. Gen Z is 1996 to 2010. They're part of the first mobile first generation. They learn to swipe before they learn to speak. And their expectations around technology and behavior are significantly impacting how technology is being pushed out today. So these are my kids. This is Gavin, Audrey, and Grant. They're 19, 17, and 13. And their expectations, again, around entertainment. Gen Z spends 2.5 hours a day with on-demand content, 1.5 hours a day gaming, and 52 minutes a day with music. let's talk about gaming for just a moment. That's a key foundational element for how experiences are going to evolve. Right now, it's the hour and a half. What most people don't realize, though, is that gaming is serving as the foundation for the coming metaverse. The metaverse is the idea of connected immersive experiences to where we'll be able to seamlessly go back and forth between physical and digital reality. We're seeing it in the form of Fortnite, in the form of Roblox. You're seeing it now, it's not just about it being a game, it's an entertainment platform. You have Travis Scott that basically put on a virtual concert inside of Fortnite to 27 million concurrent viewers. It's fundamentally changing and transforming expectations and behavior. 96% of Gen Z games. It's not do you play, it's what do you play? And there's new social currencies that are arising as a part of this. Now, it's not just Gen Z. From a pharma perspective, what we don't realize is that over 24.6 million Americans over the age of 55 classify themselves as gamers. When we think about adherence programs, we think about putting together different ways in which we can modify behavior in a specific way. Don't forget about the importance of gamification in those programs. All right. Now we set the stage for gaming. The camera is going to play a foundational part of this transformation and how experiences are going to evolve. Right now, 83% of Gen Z has played with augmented reality filters. 69% of them consider themselves content creators. And a very, very interesting stat that I just read yesterday. 62% of millennials and 60% of Gen Z actually care more about their online persona and how they're positioning themselves than they do in real life. So this is a massive shift that we have to pay attention to. For me, the camera was a capture device. That's how I use the camera. That's how I use the device. And a lot of us do. We take 400 million selfies every day. Quick question, last 24 hours, taking a selfie? Yeah, raise a hand. It's okay, it's a safe space. But for my daughter, it's more about persistent presence. She's on with her friends. They're FaceTiming. They're connecting in a way that isn't always about direct one-to-one interaction and communication. It's just this idea of presence. Now, moving forward, a lot of the major tech providers are looking at this in a very unique way. So this is about the democratization of content. As I'm looking at and watching and monitoring ecosystems and patents in these other specific areas, what I've realized is this. As you have a strong base to actually launch a platform from, you're able to democratize through third-party developers, you're able to quickly drive adoption of new technologies. This has been the playbook for Facebook. This has been the playbook for Apple, for Google, and for others. So it's all about this idea of ubiquitous connection. We talk about the convergence of experiences. We've talked about the camera. We've talked a little bit about the metaverse. Let's talk a little bit about messaging. One thing that most people don't realize, especially marketers, we tend to think that social media is the be-all, end-all in terms of the way in which people connect and share information. The reality is private messaging actually surpassed open social in 2016 as the primary way in which people interact. You have Facebook consolidating the back end, combining Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger to form an ecosystem of 2.6 billion people that they're able to then create this connection with. We'll talk a lot more about conversational experiences and how they align with artificial intelligence as well in the upcoming section. So to me, it's about you're seeing a convergence of experience through the messenger platforms. Within Facebook Messenger, you can basically engage with a brand. You can change the way you shop and the way that you buy. You can use augmented reality to show different features, and it's all through one single connected conversational thread. So the camera, as you saw in that last example, it's a bridge to intelligence. It's a bridge to the multiverse. It's a bridge for how we can enhance two-dimensional objects into a virtual world. And from a rep enablement perspective, or how we think about using kind of older, antiquated physical paper, we can quickly enhance that in ways that we never thought possible. Now, we're going to shift from the idea of control to enabling experiences through the idea of ease and convenience. We're going to talk about exponential. As we think about the role of artificial intelligence, I've done proprietary research across all generational cohorts, and one thing has consistently come across as why people will adopt emerging technologies. It's ease and convenience, bar none across all cohorts. So what we're going to talk about in exponential, and exponential again is about intelligent systems. We're going to talk about Pixar movies. We're going to talk about and define artificial intelligence. We're going to talk a lot about voice-based assistants in the voice ecosystem. And finally, we're going to talk about a theory that I have that's called the proxy web. So let's get started. Who likes Pixar movies? Anyone? Yeah? Yeah? Who's heard of the Pixar theory? The Pixar theory states that all Pixar movies happen on a single timeline, from The Good Dinosaur all the way through to Monsters, Inc. And that along the way, you see the rise and fall of humanity. During the middle of this timeline, we see an event. This event is the introduction of artificial intelligence through the OmniDroid. Now, in this instance, the OmniDroid becomes self-aware and it begins to kind of run chaotically throughout the movie. But what we see, it's not about, our view of artificial intelligence comes from science fiction. A lot of people think about Ultron from the Avengers or different types of the machines from the Matrix. The reality though, it's not, The Incredibles 2 actually gave away what the true approach would be. And spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, it's about ease and convenience. It's about allowing and enabling individuals. So, and that's actually key in terms of how we'll actually adopt it in real life. It's about ease and convenience. All right, let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. Let's define it. Why is it disrupting industries so much? There are three types of AI. There's artificial narrow intelligence. Think about your Alexa, think about chatbots. There's artificial general intelligence. This is where basically the computing power kind of is on par with all of human thinking. And there's artificial superintelligence. That's where we start getting into the territories of science fiction and hive minds and those different types of things. But why are we talking about this? Why is this happening now? The reality is we're in the golden age of AI. The cost of GPUs is lower than ever. The amount of data, which is oil for artificial intelligence, is at an all-time high. And also the ability to create and craft different types of algorithms that can apply to business problems. It's just so much easier to do now and being enabled by third parties like Google. So to me, I get asked this question a lot. Like, aren't you worried about artificial intelligence transforming industries and taking away opportunities for individuals? And what I actually see in kind of the application of AI over the last 5 to 6 years, it's really more about intelligence augmentation. It's about creating efficiencies in how we work. It's about being able to process large amounts of unstructured data. 90% of the world's data is unstructured. And one of the only ways we can actually find themes, perceptions, occasions, or make sense of it is by using different types of machine learning models, building different types of classifiers. So this is a key point in terms of how we can transform business. When we're talking about marketing, there's a direct correlation between artificial intelligence and kind of the shifts in behaviors that we're seeing across industries. Marketing used to be based on precision. It was all about precision targeting, using as much information about an individual as you could and to retarget them and to position a message, whether you're an HCP, a caregiver, a patient, whomever. But now it's less about precision because of the pending no more cookies, right? So it's actually moving towards predictive states to where we can predict next best action. We can predict how and when an individual may interact with a piece of content based on certain attributes of the individual, based on psychographic information, based on all these other proxies. Because of the shifts and changing, it's important now that we integrate AI into how we actually map a specific patient journey, an HCP journey, enable a field rep in terms of how they can connect. So that's a key part. So now we're going to shift a little bit and we're going to talk about multiple modalities. Right now, the primary way in which we interact is through desktop and mobile. Moving forward, we're going to talk about voice, we're going to talk about vision, we're going to talk about touch, and how those evolving experiences need to be considered when we're thinking about new ways to communicate and connect. And I like to think about this through the lens of five levels of autonomy to clarify it. Level 1 is about chatbots. Level 2 is voice-based ecosystems. Level 3 is digital avatars. Level 4 is emotive robotics. And 5, Westworld. We may not get to 5, at least not yet. So let's start with the mobile device and the voice assistants. We've touched on chat briefly. 90 million individuals within the US use mobile assistants monthly, 90 million. Of that, 60% of them use them 10 or more times a month. That's a lot. The number one actually used voice assistant is actually Siri, even though most people think from a brand recognition perspective, it's Amazon and Alexa. And this is key. Voice-based assistants are eventually going to become preference centers for us and how we interact and interface with the world. What you're seeing on the screen right now is 77 million people use virtual assistants in the car. This is an example of Google's concierge service, where they're able to take and actually provide the most relevant information for you while you're on the road, hands-free. The other key part to consider here, what I'm seeing is that you're seeing virtual assistants that are going to continue to move towards the center of operating systems. They're going to become proxies for us. So what you're seeing on the screen right now, you're seeing Google Assistant actually renting a car on behalf of an individual without any interaction from that specific person. Again, becoming preference centers, ease and convenience, providing a simple utility, connecting various services for us on our behalf. So this is an example from a company I've worked with in the past called Soul Machines. What they do is they provide digital avatars that essentially through the camera of the individual they're basically communicating with, they can read facial expressions. There's machine learning algorithms that are happening on the back end. But you're seeing this adopted in other industries like financial services, as well as travel and hospitality. And eventually within pharma, from a hybrid approach to actually in-person reps to virtual digital representation. So we'll continue to see that evolve over time. The other piece that's very interesting, Elon Musk and Tesla have been in the news quite a bit, mostly for space travel and some of those other key pieces. What most people don't realize, they're actually working on humanoid robotics. The idea of emotive robotics as another way in which we can interact with technology within our world is one that's rapidly evolving as well. So that's the fourth level of autonomy. We're shifting from this idea of the Internet of Things to autonomous things. And that's a big transformation that's being facilitated by 5G technology. So what I'm seeing here, this is an example of what I call the proxy web. This is where my specific virtual assistant can communicate with yours. It can set up the time in which we could connect to grab a cup of coffee. The assistants would talk on the back end, the best routes to take, communicate with one another in terms of all of the other ancillary pieces that may go into how we schedule and coordinate our physical lives. So that's a key thing. And one final point to consider when we're talking about the role of artificial intelligence and the future of marketing and communication, it's not always going to be about a single individual in the center. There's also going to be the systems that are going to be facilitating and executing on behalf as well. And it's hard to evoke emotion from an algorithm. So how you can connect in an omnichannel way with various individuals will differ drastically based on the type of channel in the mix that you're going to put forward. But it's a key point to consider. One side is more about structured data. One side is about the persuasion through the creative. It's the coming together of the two that are going to have the biggest impact moving forward. All right, we've talked about empower. That's all about enabling control. We've talked about exponential, the rise and application of intelligent systems. Now, we're going to talk about enhanced. This is all about bringing together physical and digital into one reality. Let's get started. So before I jump into all the nuances tied to spatial computing and the implications of the metaverse, I'm going to start with The Matrix. So in 1999, it was one of my favorite movies. It just blew my mind. I'm so incredibly excited The Matrix 4 is coming out later this year. But it really provided that single question of what is reality? And who's heard of the simulation theory? The simulation theory states that we potentially are all living in some type of massive computer simulation. Whether you believe that or not, the reality is what you're seeing on the screen now is you're seeing the ability to just kind of spatially capture and bend elements of augmented reality to fit our physical environment. And this idea of blending simulation and real life is a key theme for how experiences are going to continue to evolve. So we're going to look at the metaverse. We're going to look at computer vision. We're going to look at what's called a digital twin. And ultimately, we're going to end on synthetic reality. But again, this is all about perception. All right. Now, coming into this idea of the metaverse, again, it's about this single connected. Think about how you have various applications now. Think about how you're interacting with social channels, etc. Now amplify that by 1,000,000. Anyone who's played any type of game such as Fortnite or Roblox or Destiny or anything else, you're beginning to see kind of this rise of economies. You're seeing social status tied to avatars. There's a reason why you're hearing millions and millions of dollars are being millions and millions of dollars are basically being traded when it comes to NFTs or non-fungible tokens. Those are just a simple way of saying a single piece of ownable digital art, if it's an original. And this is becoming the new social currency for people's profiles, and millions of dollars are being spent on that. So we have to think about that from a brand perspective. What implications does that have for us as new economies are on the rise? You know, for one, when we think about immersive technology and immersive content, we start with VR, start with virtual reality. That's where Facebook invested heavily in Oculus. You see 171 million Oculus headsets out in the wild. Most people think about Oculus in terms of gaming. Only 16% use it for gaming. The rest is really for presence. It's for viewing 360-degree photos. It's for collaborating with team members. And that's actually a key point. A lot of how we actually hold meetings now within my team is within virtual reality, either an app called Spatial or in Facebook's workspaces. So it's a great, fun way to connect virtually, especially since we haven't been able to be together in person as much. So this idea of collaboration. Also, we're seeing that rise again of a new economy. What you're seeing on the screen is a representation of a digital overlay within physical clothing and your ability to change and transform that. As we move from form factors beyond just the desktop and mobile phone and start getting into voice, vision, and other modalities, you're going to see a rise in terms of how we actually interact with the physical world. Again, coming back to that idea that Gen Z and millennials care more about the online presence than they do the physical world. And you're going to see the blending of the two. All right, let's talk a little bit about computer vision and pull it back to the camera. Computer vision is a form of artificial intelligence. It pulls high dimensional elements from your environment. That's what it does. And it helps drive different types of processing and decisioning. And that's a key point, because as we continue to see the camera become more of a key element on how we interact and interface with the world, what you're seeing on the screen right now is Google Lenses. This is a simple application that's actually embedded within the Google app. It's that little rainbow camera in the search bar. What you're able to do is you're able to pull out context from the real world. You can basically point your camera at something. I've done it recently at a picture in a hotel. Basically scanned it and was able to pull who the artist was and all the information about it and the history, etc. So it's that seamless connection between the physical world and the digital world. This is also applying to search. So a number of us still use search as a primary way in which we kind of drive connection and campaigns and those different pieces. What you're seeing is the connection between search and computer vision and three-dimensional renderings of augmented reality directly from the search bar. This is muscle flexion on the screen. You know, if I had this when I was a student, like, this is just mind-blowing. And what we're also seeing as we're taking steps towards redefining and basically digitizing our worlds, you're seeing autonomous mapping. So this was from CES. This is a robot that goes around and scans the real world. In order to create a seamless connection between digital and physical, we have to be able to map it. We also have to be able to capture. So this is kind of volumetric spatial capture technology that essentially does three-dimensional scans of your entire body and places you into these experiences. So you can be yourself within these environments without having to necessarily just be an avatar. And let's talk a little bit too about experience. So as we take and craft, as digital strategy has evolved over the last however many years, it started with tactics. Now it's less about tactics. Don't just create a shoppable ad. Make your entire shop shoppable. The idea of digital twins and taking, basically, this actually came from manufacturing, to where you would actually recreate a physical system in a digital way and run different simulations and scenarios. The same principle applies in terms of how we can actually connect and create and craft new experiences. Now, let's pull it back in with the virtual assistants for just a moment. And again, this is all about convergence, how it's all coming together. I have a hypothesis, and I call it the Proxy Web Hypothesis. This is when our virtual assistants, remember being preference centers, can become the triggers for digital experiences, the world around us, to drive personalized experiences at scale. So again, it's all coming together. The assistants know us. They understand where we shop, what we do, what our preferences are. If I wanted to go to a retail shop to find a specific collectible, it would know my affinity for a certain IP like Star Wars, direct me through that experience to it, and be able to offer something of value prior to the actual transaction. So again, this is all coming. Now, how is this going to happen? To me, again, it came back to this idea of ecosystems. We talked about Facebook, we talked about Google. You're seeing now Facebook partnering with Ray-Ban, and they're launching their version of a smart glass. So this just recently came out. These are the Ray-Ban Stories, Wayfarer and other model. But again, it's taking that idea of integration of the camera. Going back to Google Glass for just a minute, it was a little ahead of its time. It was a little industrial. What most people want is they want style and convenience. So by taking and combining with an iconic brand, it basically begins to build the affinity towards the technology. And that's what we're seeing happen today. Apple also has many patents out, and it's going to be when Facebook and Apple and Google and others have enough of a product overlay that you're going to see the shift. Remember when we shifted from the iPhone to the Apple Watch, and now how that's ubiquitous in terms of connection? The same thing is going to happen with smart glasses. Smart glasses are how we're going to actually begin to unlock some of these core experiences at scale, and not necessarily be dependent on looking through our camera lens on our phones to drive these experiences moving forward. It's about this idea of enhanced mobility, because we're moving towards this idea of synthetic reality, where our physical world and digital world are blended as one. It may not be as intense as what you're seeing on the screen. And yes, for anyone who's wondering, that is a cat in the upper corner there. You can't have a presentation about digital and innovation and experience without that. So, but again, this is how our world is going to evolve. And we have to think differently about how we communicate. Now, how is it going to happen? How are we going to evolve? I teased it earlier. The virtual assistants are moving to the center of the operating system. Google and Amazon want to minimize the dependency on apps. Apple wants to keep and maintain it. It's a primary source of revenue for them. But the plan with Google, the plan with Amazon, is to continue to stitch together various applications into services that are called scenes. It's how you're able to see the virtual assistant making a car reservation for an individual earlier. And that's a key element. If it's already embedded and a part of the operating system and how we operate, we become dependent upon it. So, and then it pulls it together and it makes our lives easier. It's moving from this idea of the Internet of Things to autonomous things. Autonomy is driven by intelligence, and intelligence will be facilitated by the algorithms and the inputs and the connection and stitching together of all these various events. That's the key. So when is this going to happen? I get asked this question a lot. When do we see the shift in modalities and this kind of this transformation in terms of the way that we live? And to me, it's 2028. You're already starting to see it with the launch of Facebook and Ray-Ban's partnership. You're seeing it now in the foundation of how essentially augmented reality is being democratized across third parties by Facebook and Apple and others. And you're beginning to see it now in the rise of the metaverse and the economies that are coming together. Gaming is just a baseline foundation. We're going to see a coming together of all of these experiences, new economies rise, new job types, new ways of communicating. And we have to prepare as marketers. Now, we won't get to photorealism until sometime in the 2030s, but that's coming as well. Right now, you're seeing a lot of sophisticated gaming engines being used as a way to kind of create some of these experiences and these connections. So to recap the filter piece before we get to the application and actioning and how you shift your mindset, it's about empower, which is all about control. It's about exponential, which is all about intelligent systems. And it's about enhanced, bridging physical and digital reality. All right, we've talked a lot about trends. Now let's talk about what does this mean for you? How do you prepare? how do you not only prepare your organization, but your mindset for shifting how you think? So that's what we're going to talk about now. First, I used to teach at SMU in Dallas. I taught various marketing courses, and it always started with the foundational 4 Ps, of product, price, place, promotion. For me, in preparing for this new reality, there are 4 new Ps. There's plan, there's predictive, there's proxy, and there's pervasive. So let's talk about those for just a moment. Plan is having a plan for data and AI. This is important when it comes to structuring data. That's how systems work. It's the type of information that's going in. It's not about evoking emotion from an algorithm, but having highly structured data across platforms and ecosystems is how you can begin to then influence the algorithm. The second part here is about predictive. This is, again, the application of AI. It's understanding how to predict the next best action. It's predicting what the specific experience needs to be. So that's a key component as we begin looking at this evolution of experience when it comes to marketing and communication. The third is understand the proxy web is coming. Understand the role of voice-based assistants. Have your brands integrated within those voice ecosystems. Stake your claim. It's the Wild West right now. And so it's important that you at least have a presence in each of those specific developing ecosystems. The final piece is really around pervasive, designing beyond desktop and mobile, preparing for experiences that may initially seem like, okay, that's interesting, but look for the connections. Everything has to be rooted in business goals in terms of how we actually deploy solutions and create experiences. But you also need to be experimenting with emerging applications in order to be prepared. Otherwise, you might get left behind. All right. So in terms of a roadmap, so how can I actually begin thinking about the application of these things? There are 5 core areas to focus. 1, understand multimodal is coming. That's voice, vision, and touch. 2, understand the role of predictive analytics and begin to take steps forward within your organization to build an infrastructure to where you can actually begin not only collecting and visualizing information, but actually assessing it, analyzing it, and driving prediction and predictive models off of it. The third is understand. We're going from the Internet of Things to autonomous things. How does that impact my brand? How do I need to be thinking about the evolution of experience? The fourth, don't underestimate the role of gaming, especially when it comes to adherence. We saw the numbers, 96% of Gen Z, 24.6 million US adults over the age of 55. And finally, experiment with spatial computing. Redefine the way you collaborate. Understand that how our physical world looks is going to change. They're going to become new communication platforms for us, new canvases. And that's a key thing to consider as we're kind of thinking through the application of each of the things that we talked about earlier today. Because you have to have an experience mindset to make some of these shifts. It's not like it was traditionally to where we could just go forward with, a single brand campaign over the course of a year and we just let it run and do its thing. It's so much more sophisticated than that now. It goes beyond just crafting a single persona in terms of drafting communication. So we have to change the way we think. The way I think about marketing before, think about it like a single arcade cabinet. You would go in, you would have that experience. Think about it like multi-channel marketing. There's a single channel. It has its own role in terms of how you interact with a consumer, and that's it. The reality as we move towards omnichannel experiences, it's much more personalized. It's much more about how each specific online and offline interaction now then comes to you. And how are you connecting those various data sets? What's the role of content? How are you creating basically modular content processes that allow for this dynamic distribution of content? It's a really key piece. So as I think about it, it's shifting from the idea of user experience, which traditionally is associated with a website, and moving towards an experience strategy mindset. What does the comprehensive experience look like across all channels? How are we ensuring that it's consistent across each channel? How are we shifting modalities in terms of how we're actually crafting and creating some of these experiences? And again, this is about creating personalized experiences through all of the information and data that's available. It's also how we unify content and create consistency. This is absolutely paramount and critical. And I'm seeing it happen right now across all of pharma, whether you're focusing on HCP, whether you're focusing on patient, whether you're focusing on rep enablement. The drive to unify content is key. So how do I then, as an individual, beyond my organization, begin to make that shift? So number one, it's about understanding change is inevitable. It's going to happen. Technology is going to continue to evolve. We're seeing it shifting at exponential rates in which we've never seen before. We also have to acknowledge the truth. We don't necessarily like change as people. Not everybody has this adaptive mindset and that's open to taking it all in. We get comfortable. So we have to acknowledge the truth that we don't necessarily like change. And we also have to realize willpower and motivation aren't enough. It's not enough to say you're going to become an omnichannel expert overnight. That's not a realistic goal. The key goal is to take small steps. That's a really key point. Set small, realistic goals for yourself on a daily and weekly basis. This is what then begins to shift the mindset. Pick an area or topic that you're not comfortable with and basically research that and just become more proficient in that specific area. Just start small. And we have to be comfortable with the F word. No, we're talking about failure here. So we have to be comfortable with the fact that we might fail, and it's okay. When you're dealing with new and emerging platforms and technologies or areas that are outside of your comfort zone, it's okay. Facebook has their mantra of fail fast. They would rather dive right in, try it, figure out what's not working, adjust course. So we have to have that same mindset when it comes to adoption of technology. Now, there are 10 ways to shift, 10 things you can do to think about this. The first one is having a common vision is absolutely key. So if you're managing a team or you're part of a team or you're managing a brand, setting the vision for how you're going to set the stage for this connected experience is absolutely critical. The second part is making sure you have a common language. When you're talking to your agencies and your suppliers and the individuals that you're working with on a regular basis, make sure you're all meaning the same thing. AI means different things to different people. Workflow, efficiency means something different. So versus any type of solution or classifier or different type of model you can use against data. Be very deliberate about having a common set of language that you're all working against. The third is having a learning mindset. You have to be open to learning about new experiences and shifting the way that we think. The fourth is there's this argument. Do I become an expert in an area or am I a generalist? The reality is organizations need both. You need subject matter experts in emerging areas, such as marketing technology integration, how you can integrate with a content, digital asset management system. What does the modular content process look like? Those might require an SME. But you have to have enough of a knowledge base across how all of these pieces come together that you can have effective conversations. So you need experts and generalists. And the fifth one is around silos. So many organizations are set up to where there may be a center of excellence over here, or there's a group here, or there's someone over here. We have to break down silos, create interagency teams, and really work together in a way that we've never worked before from a collaboration standpoint. It's absolutely critical. 6 is understanding the role of the big idea and how that's shifted just a bit. It's still all about great creative. That's going to evoke emotion. How you craft campaigns now and maintain message integrity and make sure that it goes through multiple thousands of different iterations of creative is absolutely critical. So having an understanding for how you're going to connect that top level campaign, but be iterative enough to basically execute is absolutely critical. And also, what's your +1? I started writing back in 2007. And since then, maybe about 600 posts on my blog. You could always tell what I was working on because that's what I'd be writing about. And that was the way I took and absorbed a lot of different information and began to apply it back. What's your +1? What are you doing to further enhance your professional positioning within your organization? How are you adding additional value? We touched on this briefly in the digital twin section, but again, going from tactics to experiences, thinking about it in a holistic way. What's the entire experience look like? What are all of the specific channels in the ecosystem? How are they sharing data? How are we able to kind of connect those to where it's seamless and we're crafting true omnichannel experiences? And 9, it's again acknowledging experiences are evolving. Pay attention to simple things like the rise in which video games. Most people don't realize this. The video game industry makes double what movies and music make combined, double. And it's key that a lot of these experiences are going to come from these fun entertainment properties and then see mass adoption. And finally, dimensionalize omnichannel for you and your organization. What does it mean for you? What are the various steps that are the most critical based on the information that you have access to? All right. We talked about a lot today. We talked about empower, we talked about exponential, we talked about enhance. We talked about 4 new Ps, and we talked about how to shift to have an experience mindset. If you have any additional questions, you can feel free to email me or follow me on any specific social channels at @BlackFin360. But again, I'm Tom Edwards. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the conference.